The room was glowing with golden light, glasses clinking, laughter swirling through the air. I lifted a champagne flute, the bubbles sparkling under the chandeliers. But before I could take a sip, Margaret, my mother-in-law, the woman who had always been my safe haven, collapsed beside me. Her body hit the marble floor with a sound I will never forget. My heart froze. That glass, it was meant for me. And the hand that had prepared it, the hand I once trusted more than my own, belonged to my husband. The room shimmered beneath 1,000 golden lights. Chandeliers glowed overhead, casting warm halos across the polished marble floors. Guests raised their glasses, laughter spilling over like the champagne that bubbled in crystal flutes. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, my father-in-law's retirement party, a rare gathering where every branch of the Miller family came together under one roof in Dallas. I remember holding my glass, staring at the way the bubbles caught the light. The label on the bottle had been elegant, handwritten, "Happy Retirement, Rachel. Love, David." My husband. The man who had always known exactly what to say, what to give. A doctor, a healer, the person I once trusted with my very life. But the irony was sharp. I hadn't touched alcohol in weeks, ever since David had insisted I start a strict health regimen. "It'll make you stronger, Rachel," he had said, smiling as though he cared. And I believed him. So tonight, I thought I was doing something kind, something thoughtful. I passed the glass to Margaret, my mother-in-law, the woman whose warm smile and tight hugs had often felt more like family than anyone else. "Go on," I teased, nudging the glass toward her hand. She chuckled, eyes crinkling. "Champagne this fine. Rachel, I don't deserve it." "You do," I said softly. "More than I ever could." She lifted the glass, the bubbles fizzing just beneath her nose, and took a sip. The orchestra swelled, violins weaving through the chatter, and for a brief moment I let myself exhale. Then the sound came. A sharp crack against marble. The glass shattered, spraying champagne across the floor. Margaret's body followed, crumpling beside me in an instant. The music screeched to a halt. Gasps, then screams. Chairs toppled. I dropped to my knees, hands trembling as I gripped her arm. Her eyes rolled back, her breaths shallow and ragged. "No, no, no, stay with me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Margaret, please." Someone shouted to call an ambulance. Another yelled for space. The party had dissolved into chaos. My chest heaved, the room spinning. That glass, it was meant for me. And then, like ice sliding down my spine, the thought struck. The handwriting on the label. The gift. The man behind it all. My husband. The hand that once placed a wedding ring on my finger, had just handed me a weapon meant to end my life. The sirens wailed in the distance as the paramedics lifted Margaret onto a stretcher. My hands were still damp from the champagne that had splashed across the marble floor, sticky against my skin. My heart hammered, but beneath the chaos, one truth pulsed louder than anything else: that glass was never meant for her, it was meant for me. As I stood frozen in the wreckage of celebration, I couldn't help but think back. Back to the life I thought I had, the man I thought I knew. David Miller. My husband. Respected cardiologist. The kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone feel safe just by flashing that perfect smile. People said I was lucky. "Rachel, you married a man who saves lives for a living." And for years, I believed them. I believed him. Our home in Dallas was everything a young family could dream of: framed photographs lining the hallway, the scent of Margaret's apple pie wafting through on Sundays, laughter echoing across the backyard where our children once played. From the outside, we looked untouchable, picture perfect. But perfection, I've learned, is just another kind of mask. I used to think Margaret was my anchor, the one person in David's family who truly saw me. When his temper grew sharp, when the pressure of his work spilled into our marriage, she was there. A gentle hand on mine, her voice soft. "He loves you, Rachel. He just forgets how to show it sometimes." I clung to those words, let them patch the cracks I was too afraid to acknowledge. And now, she was fighting for her life because of a drink I had placed in her hands. I can still hear the faint conversation from earlier that evening, echoing in my mind like a cruel reminder. "Rachel," David had said over the phone, his voice smooth, calm, too calm. "I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight, but I wanted you to have something special. That champagne, it's just for you. Just for me." My stomach twisted as the words replayed, each syllable cutting deeper. I remembered the curve of his handwriting on that label, the flourish of his initials. No one could mimic that. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. But the moment wasn't mine to take. Margaret was in critical condition, and I was left standing in the shadow of a revelation too dark to say out loud. As the paramedics disappeared through the ballroom doors, whispers began circling the room. Guests eyed me cautiously, their smiles of sympathy edged with suspicion. It was my glass, my gift, my husband. I wrapped my arms around myself, fighting the chill that seeped in despite the heavy Texas heat outside. The chandeliers above now felt harsh, exposing, as though the entire world could see the truth I was barely able to face. The man I had built my life with, the father of my children, may have just tried to kill me. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a single flicker of hope fought against the darkness. Maybe, just maybe, there was another explanation. Maybe the man I loved wasn't a monster. But even as I whispered that hope to myself, my gut screamed louder. This was only the beginning. The hospital corridors were cold, sterile, humming with the steady rhythm of machines. Hours blurred as I sat hunched in the waiting room, fingers knotted so tightly they ached. Every second stretched like a lifetime. Through the glass partition, I could see Margaret, motionless, pale, machines breathing for her. My anchor. My safe haven. And she was slipping away. I pressed my palms together, whispering a prayer I wasn't sure I believed anymore. "Please, God, don't take her. Not like this. Not because of me." The squeak of polished shoes on tile pulled me from my thoughts. A uniformed officer approached, notepad in hand, his expression professional but sharp. He stopped in front of me. "Mrs. Miller," he said, voice clipped. "We need to ask you a few questions." I swallowed, throat dry. "Of course, anything." He sat across from me, flipping open his pad. "The toxicology report on the wine glass is back. Traces of propranolol, a beta blocker. Very strong dose. In humans, lethal." My stomach lurched. The name itself hit me like a slap. Propranolol. I'd heard it before, late-night phone calls David took, medical terms he brushed off when I asked. The officer's eyes narrowed. Where did the bottle come from? I hesitated, every nerve screaming at me to lie. But the truth tumbled out, fragile and broken. My husband. David. He sent it from New York. As a gift. The officer scribbled, his pen scratching the page like a verdict being written. "Did you drink any yourself?" I shook my head violently. "No. I gave it to my mother-in-law." His gaze held mine, firm and unblinking. For a moment, I felt like I was the one on trial. "You understand, Mrs. Miller," he said, his tone measured, "without proof, it's your word against his. And your husband is a respected physician. That complicates things." A cold sweat trickled down my spine. I wanted to scream, to shout that it wasn't just my word, it was my life, my intuition, my certainty. But all I managed was a whisper. "You don't understand. That champagne, it wasn't meant for her. It was meant for me." The officer's silence was louder than any accusation. He closed his notepad slowly, then stood. "We'll be in touch." And with that, he walked away, leaving me crushed beneath the weight of suspicion. I leaned back in the plastic chair, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My mind replayed David's voice on the phone, "It's just for you." My gut twisted, every instinct screaming the truth. David wasn't away on business. He was away from the scene of the crime. And the man who had sworn to protect lives, had just tried to end mine. The waiting room emptied as the night dragged on, but I couldn't move. I sat alone, surrounded by the soft whir of vending machines and the sterile scent of disinfectant. Every sound, every beep, every distant voice, stabbed into me like shards of glass. My phone vibrated in my lap. The screen lit up with a name that once meant safety, love, forever. David. For a moment, I just stared at it, my chest tightening. How many nights had I waited for his call, just to hear his voice and know he was safe? But tonight, the glow of his name felt like poison. My finger hovered over the screen before I swiped to answer. "Rachel," his voice came through smooth, steady, too steady. "How's the party? Did you enjoy the champagne?" The words echoed in my ears like the hiss of a snake. I gripped the phone tighter, nails digging into my palm. "Say it," I thought. "Tell him you know." But my voice trembled. "David. Margaret is in the hospital. She collapsed." A pause. A sharp inhale, but no shock. No panic. Just silence stretching far too long. Then, softly, almost rehearsed. "That's terrible. Is she going to be all right?" I wanted to scream, "Don't pretend. Don't you dare pretend." Instead, my throat closed around the words. Tears blurred my vision. "You should come back," I whispered. "Now." Another pause, then his reply, "I'll try, but the conference isn't over. I can't just walk away." Conference. The word tasted bitter. He was a doctor. He knew what propranolol did. He knew the dosage. He knew what it meant when a glass of champagne stopped a heart. As the call ended, my hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. My chest tightened, a scream clawing its way up but never finding air. I pressed my fists against my knees, rocking slightly, trying to breathe through the ache. Images flickered in my mind like broken film reels, David placing his hand over mine during our wedding vows, whispering, "In sickness and in health." His laughter with our children in the backyard. The birthday cards, the quiet evenings when I thought love lived in the space between us. All of it, lies. Masks. A carefully curated performance. I bent forward, pressing my forehead into my palms. The man I loved, the man I built a life with, had sharpened a knife for my back. The pain wasn't a wound, it was an abyss, bottomless, devouring everything I thought I knew. And yet, beneath the grief, another fire ignited. Rage. If he thought I would stay silent, if he thought I would break, he was wrong. I lifted my head, eyes burning, vision swimming but unyielding. Somewhere in the hospital, Margaret fought for her life. And I swore to myself, right then and there, I would fight too. Not with screams. Not with chaos. But with something colder. Sharper. Deadlier. Revenge. The hospital hallway was quiet now, too quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long, harsh shadows across the linoleum floor. I stood alone, staring through the glass at Margaret's frail body tangled in tubes and wires. Machines breathed for her, each beep a reminder of the poison still coursing through her veins. My reflection in the glass startled me. Hollow eyes, trembling lips, the shell of a woman I used to be. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. Is this who I am now? The victim? The wife who was meant to die but didn't. Tears welled, but I forced them back. Crying wouldn't save Margaret. It wouldn't protect me. And it wouldn't expose David. I pressed my palm flat against the cold glass, whispering to the woman lying beyond it. You saved me, Margaret. You took the glass that should have ended me. And for that, I swear to you, I will not let him win. The words trembled at first, then hardened into steel. I remembered David's voice on the phone, calm, detached, rehearsed. How's the champagne? Did you enjoy it? No shock, no fear, no humanity. Only calculation. My breath hitched. The rage inside me solidified, sharper than any blade. He wanted me gone. He thought I was weak. He thought I'd break quietly, disappear without a sound. I whispered to myself, eyes locked on Margaret's still form. But I won't break. I will fight. And when I strike back, he'll never see it coming. The waiting room door creaked open. A nurse stepped in, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Miller, you should get some rest. It's going to be a long night. I turned, forcing a hollow smile, masking the fire burning beneath. Yes. A long night. As the nurse walked away, I clenched my fists, the decision already carved into my bones. This wouldn't be a story of grief. It wouldn't be the tragedy of a wife betrayed. This would be the making of something else entirely. I would gather the pieces of my shattered life, sharpen them into weapons, and carve out justice. Revenge wouldn't be rage. It would be cold. Calculated. Precise. A masterpiece. And I would be the artist. Morning bled into the hospital windows, pale light washing across the sterile tiles. I hadn't slept. My mind was a storm, memories of David's smile, Margaret's collapse, the officer's cold eyes drilling suspicion into me. Every piece pointed to one truth, but I needed more than instinct. I needed proof. I stepped outside, the Texas air heavy with heat even at dawn. My phone buzzed. A message from Gary Lopez, our longtime family friend, the local veterinarian. Rachel, I need to see you. It's important. Important. My pulse quickened. Gary's office smelled of antiseptic and animal fur, a strange comfort amidst the chaos of my life. He greeted me with none of his usual warmth. His eyes were dark, serious, as though he already knew the storm I was caught in. Rachel, he said, shutting the door behind me. The toxicology report. I ran it myself. There's no doubt. It was propranolol. A massive dose. The word hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. I clenched my jaw, nails digging into my palms. Could it have been a mistake? I asked, though I already knew the answer. My voice cracked, desperation slipping through. Gary shook his head firmly. No. This wasn't an accident. Someone put it there. And you know as well as I do, who had the access, the knowledge, the motive. My chest tightened, breath caught between grief and fury. David. His name screamed in my veins. But hearing it from Gary made it real, carved it in stone. I paced the office, the floor creaking beneath me. The police don't believe me. They think it's my word against his. Gary leaned forward, his voice low. Then you need more than words. You need evidence they can't ignore. I stopped, staring at him, my heart racing. Evidence. The word felt like a key sliding into a lock. He pulled out a folder, dropping it onto the desk. Inside, chemical charts, medical notes, dosage calculations. This is what I found. And Rachel, this drug isn't easy to come by. Unless you're a doctor with hospital access. Unless you're David. I froze, the room spinning. My husband, the man who swore to save lives, had ordered the very compound that nearly ended mine. Gary's eyes searched mine. You need to be careful. If he knows you're onto him. His voice trailed off, but the silence said more than words. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Then I'll have to stay one step ahead. My hand brushed against the folder, its weight heavier than any weapon. My first clue. My first step toward vengeance. But in that moment, as determination hardened inside me, a darker thought whispered. If David could do this once, what else was he hiding? That night, I couldn't return home. The house where David's cologne still lingered on the pillows, where our wedding photos smiled down from the walls, it had turned into enemy territory. Instead, I sat in my car outside Gary's office, the folder of evidence heavy on my lap, illuminated by the dim glow of the dashboard. I flipped through the pages again, my eyes scanning the chemical breakdowns, the hospital supply orders. Each document whispered a story, and together they screamed one undeniable truth: David wasn't careless. He was calculated. But one receipt stopped me cold. The date. It lined up perfectly with the week David convinced me to quit drinking. It's better for your health, Rachel, he had said, pressing a kiss against my forehead. My stomach churned. He hadn't been protecting me, he had been preparing me. I leaned back, the leather seat cold against my skin, heart pounding. The man I shared my bed with had been plotting my death long before that champagne bottle ever touched my lips. The thought nearly broke me, but then, anger rose, hot and sharp, slicing through the fear. If this was true, then the champagne was only one piece of his design. There had to be more. I needed to know everything. I waited until the neighborhood streets were dark and silent before driving home. My hands shook as I unlocked David's office. The room smelled faintly of cedarwood and ink, shadows stretching across the bookshelves. His mahogany desk gleamed in the sliver of moonlight cutting through the blinds. Sitting there, I felt like an intruder in my own home. I powered on his laptop. The screen flickered to life, casting a pale blue glow that made the room feel colder. My breath caught as I typed in the password. At first, nothing. Then, access granted. Folders opened one by one. Medical journals, patient files, and then, tucked away in a corner, a hidden directory labeled with nothing but a single initial. M. I clicked. My blood ran cold. Dozens of emails. Transactions routed through obscure suppliers. Orders for chemical compounds, not from the hospital pharmacy, but from private labs. Some were coded, others in shorthand only someone with medical knowledge would understand. But the pattern was there, supplies that, when pieced together, could synthesize dangerous drugs. And it wasn't just propranolol. There were others. Powerful sedatives. Rare toxins. Even experimental compounds. Each click pulled me deeper into a labyrinth I hadn't known existed. And at the center of it all was David. My hands trembled as I scrolled. One email in particular froze me. It wasn't addressed to him, it was from him. Short, cryptic, but unmistakable. Shipment secured. No one suspects a thing. Keep it discreet. D. The date was just 3 weeks ago. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse thundering in my ears. My husband wasn't just plotting against me. He was running something bigger, something far more dangerous. I whispered into the silence, my own voice shaking. Oh my God. David, what are you? The air felt heavier, pressing against me. The safe walls of my home were gone. Every photograph on the shelves, the family portraits, the smiling faces, suddenly seemed like props in his theater of lies. And then came the sound. A faint creak on the staircase behind me. I froze, every muscle locking tight. He was home. The creak on the staircase cut through the silence like a knife. My whole body tensed, heart hammering against my ribs. I glanced at the laptop, its pale blue glow still bleeding faintly through the lid. One wrong move, and it would betray me. Slowly, carefully, I slid it into the drawer, closing it just as another step groaned on the staircase. Rachel? His voice. Low. Calm. That voice that once soothed me, that once promised forever. Now it chilled me to the bone. I swallowed hard, forcing my tone to steady. Down here, I called, praying he wouldn't hear the tremor. David's shadow stretched across the doorway before he appeared, dressed in his travel suit, tie loosened, face composed. But his eyes, sharp, searching. "You're awake," he said, tilting his head. "It's late." I folded my arms, masking the adrenaline coursing through me. Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. He stepped into the office, the faint scent of cologne and airport clinging to him. His gaze swept the room, lingering a second too long on the desk. My skin prickled. "What about you?" I asked quickly, trying to redirect. "I thought you were still in New York." David's lips curled into a small smile. "Conference ended early. Thought I'd surprise you." Surprise. The word tasted like poison. I forced a smile, though my jaw ached from holding it. "Well, you did." For a long moment, he just studied me. The air thickened, heavy with unsaid truths. I felt my palms grow damp, but I didn't flinch. Not now. Finally, he reached for the drawer handle, the same one I had hidden the laptop in. My breath hitched, nails digging into my arms. If he opened it, everything would end. But then, as if the universe pitied me, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He frowned, pulling it out. After a glance, he slipped it back, turning toward me instead. "Get some rest," he said lightly, though his tone carried an edge I couldn't name. "You look exhausted." He pressed a kiss against my forehead, soft, practiced, a gesture that once felt tender but now stung like fire. Then he walked upstairs, his footsteps fading into silence. The moment he was gone, my knees buckled. I sank into the chair, gasping for air I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I had been seconds away from exposure. Seconds from ruin. Wiping the sweat from my brow, I whispered into the darkness. "This game is dangerous. But if he wants to play, I'll play. And I'll win." The night pressed down heavy over Dallas, a velvet silence broken only by the hum of cicadas outside. Upstairs, David slept soundly, his breathing slow and steady. To anyone else, he looked like the perfect husband, resting after a long trip. But to me, every exhale was a lie. I stood in the hallway, shadows swallowing me whole. My pulse had steadied since the near miss, but something inside me had changed. Fear hadn't vanished, it had transformed. Hardened. If he thinks I'll stay afraid, he's wrong. From this moment on, I am no longer his prey. I am the hunter. I moved quietly into the office, locking the door behind me. The laptop glowed again, casting an icy sheen across my face. I opened the hidden folder once more, my fingers tracing every detail like a surgeon dissecting a body. Emails. Supply orders. Bank transfers routed through offshore accounts. Each click peeled back another layer of the man I thought I knew. And then, there it was. An alias. D. Holloway. Linked to a series of shipments out of Houston. Not champagne. Not wine. Medical shipments. Controlled substances rerouted, masked as routine deliveries. I whispered under my breath, "You clever bastard." My voice was low, almost reverent, as though marveling at a predator's craft. But predators make mistakes. And I would find them. I began copying files, screen by screen, into a small encrypted drive I had bought years ago and never used. Every keystroke felt like carving another weapon. Evidence was no longer just paper, it was power. A floorboard creaked above me. I froze, breath caught. But the rhythm of his snore continued, steady. He was still asleep. I exhaled, whispering to myself, "Good. Stay sleeping, David. Because while you dream, I'll be dismantling your empire." The glow of the laptop flickered across a framed photo on the desk, our wedding day. His arm draped around me, his smile radiant, my eyes brimming with joy. I stared at it for a long time, a bitter laugh caught in my throat. That woman in the photo was dead. The one who remained was something else entirely. By dawn, I had what I needed: copies of financial records, supply chains, coded messages. Enough to start building a case. Enough to make him bleed without ever laying a hand on him. I slipped the drive into my pocket, heart steady now, cold. A plan was forming, not wild, not reckless, but meticulous. Brick by brick, I would build a cage around him. And when it was complete, I'd lock it myself. For the first time since Margaret collapsed, I felt something strange, something intoxicating. Control. But even as I savored that taste, a darker thought gnawed at me. David isn't stupid. If I could find his secrets this easily, then he has secrets buried even deeper. And those might be deadly. Morning light spilled through the blinds, slashing the office in pale strips. I hadn't closed my eyes all night. The encrypted drive sat heavy in my pocket, but one folder still haunted me, buried deeper, locked with an extra layer of security. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. A single wrong keystroke and David would know I'd been here. But instinct told me, whatever was inside was the heart of his darkness. I typed his old password, our wedding date. Denied. My hands shook as I tried again, our daughter's birthday. Denied. Finally, almost without thinking, I typed, Margaret. The screen blinked. Access granted. My stomach turned. Even his mother's name was just another tool. Inside was a set of emails unlike the others. No medical jargon, no financial codes. These were blunt. Raw. They spoke of shipments hidden in veterinary supplies, experimental drugs moved across state lines, names of hospitals, doctors, accomplices. And one message stopped me cold. Trial run complete. Target survived. Adjust dosage next time. Trial run. Target. Survived. My hands went numb. This wasn't just about me. Margaret wasn't collateral damage. She was the trial. A test to perfect the poison meant for me. Tears stung my eyes, but rage drowned them. He had used his own mother as an experiment. The man who swore to save lives wasn't just a murderer, he was a monster, refining his methods, practicing on the people closest to him. The sound of my pulse filled my ears, deafening, but I forced myself to keep reading. Another file, an attachment. I clicked. A scanned document appeared, an authorization form, signed with David's name. It wasn't just poison. It was bigger. Illegal testing, stolen medications, experimental compounds sold off to the highest bidder. And the money, God. The money trailed into an offshore account not just under his alias, but under mine. My breath hitched, the room tilting. He wasn't just trying to kill me. He was framing me. Every transaction, every file was tied neatly back to my name. If David fell, I would fall with him. I stumbled back from the desk, my chest heaving. This isn't about survival anymore. It's war. Behind me, the house creaked. The sound of footsteps overhead. David was awake. I wiped my eyes, steeling myself. The terror that once caged me had cracked. Now, all I felt was fire. He thought I was weak. He thought I wouldn't fight back. But if he wanted a war, I'd give him one. The house no longer felt like home, it felt like a trap. Every photo on the wall, every piece of furniture, every shadow whispered his control. I moved carefully through the kitchen, phone in hand, heart racing. I needed to get the drive out, get to Arthur, get help. But then his voice sliced through the morning air. Rachel. I froze. He stood in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, a coffee mug in hand. His suit pressed, his tie perfectly knotted, as if last night's chaos had never touched him. But his eyes, cold, calculating, already dissecting me. You're up early, he said lightly, sipping his coffee. Couldn't sleep. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. Too much on my mind. David's gaze lingered, sharp enough to cut. Yes. Margaret, such a tragedy. Poor timing, too, with everything happening at work. At work. The words tasted like venom. He wasn't talking about patients, he was talking about shipments, about poison. I gripped the counter behind me, knuckles white. She's strong. She'll fight through it. His smile twitched, almost mocking. Maybe. Or maybe not. Sometimes the body just gives out. The casual cruelty in his tone sent a chill through me. This wasn't the man I married. This was a stranger wearing his face. Then he stepped closer, placing his mug on the counter with deliberate calm. You know, Rachel, stress can make people paranoid. Imagine how it looks, your mother-in-law poisoned with a gift you handed her. Your handwriting on the note. Your name on the accounts. My breath caught. He knew. He knew I'd seen the files. He leaned in, his voice a whisper against my ear. Be careful what you dig for. Because sometimes, the dirt ends up on your own hands. Goosebumps prickled across my skin. I forced myself not to recoil, not to show fear. Then, just as suddenly, he stepped back, retrieving his mug. His smile returned, bright, flawless, practiced. Don't worry, darling. We'll get through this, together. And with that, he walked away, his footsteps fading up the stairs. I collapsed against the counter, shaking. He wasn't warning me, he was threatening me. And worse, he already had the upper hand. If I made one wrong move, everything, every suspicion, every piece of evidence, would turn back on me. The walls felt like they were closing in. His web tightening, strand by strand. But in that suffocating silence, one thought cut through the fear like a blade. If he thinks he's winning, then he's not watching closely enough. That night, the house pressed down on me like a coffin. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the shutters sounded like his footsteps. I locked myself in the guest room, back pressed against the door, laptop clutched to my chest like a shield. But it didn't matter. No matter how tightly I held it, I knew the truth, he had already beaten me. David had built his web carefully, thread by thread. The accounts in my name. The shipments traced back to me. If the police came tomorrow, the evidence would point to me as the mastermind. Not him. Me. The thought hollowed me out. I curled on the bed, knees drawn to my chest, tears spilling into the pillow. My body shook, silent sobs racking through me until I could barely breathe. How did it come to this? How did I ever let him so close? I closed my eyes, memories crashing over me like a flood. David's laugh, his hand on my back as we walked into parties, the way he whispered my name in the dark. 1,000 moments I thought were love, now rotting into lies. And Margaret, my safe haven, lying in a hospital bed because of me. Because I had trusted the wrong man. The guilt gnawed at me, sharp and merciless. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if it would be easier to surrender. To let the truth swallow me whole, to stop fighting a war I could never win. But then, I heard it. Faint, fragile, but undeniable. Margaret's voice, echoing in memory. "You're stronger than you think, Rachel. Don't let him decide who you are." The tears slowed. My breathing steadied. I sat up, wiping my face with shaking hands. My reflection in the mirror stared back, red eyes, pale skin, broken. But behind the cracks, a spark still burned. I whispered, voice hoarse but steady. "No. I won't be his victim. Not now. Not ever." From the nightstand, I pulled out the encrypted drive. My fingers tightened around it. This wasn't just evidence, it was my lifeline. My weapon. If David thought he had me cornered, then he hadn't realized, prey can still bite back. And this time, I wouldn't strike alone. The courthouse buzzed like a hive. Reporters crowded the marble steps, their cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward as if they could pierce the walls and pull the truth out by force. Inside, the air was thick, tension heavy enough to suffocate. I sat in the front row, Arthur by my side, the encrypted drive now transformed into a thick dossier of evidence. Every detail I'd gathered, every secret I'd unearthed, was about to be unleashed. And then, David walked in. His suit was immaculate, his smile practiced, but his eyes betrayed the cracks. Gone was the calm predator. What walked through those doors was a man caged, cornered, his empire crumbling. Our eyes met. For a moment, the world blurred away. Just him and me, predator and prey, but this time, he wasn't sure which of us was which. The district attorney rose, her voice sharp and unyielding as she laid out the case, the poisoned champagne, the offshore accounts, the coded emails, the chemical orders. Piece by piece, brick by brick, the cage tightened. When it was my turn, I stepped to the stand. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. I trusted him. I loved him. And he tried to kill me. But worse than that, he nearly killed the woman who gave him life. He betrayed not just me, not just Margaret, but the very oath he swore as a doctor, to save lives, not destroy them. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. David's jaw clenched, his mask cracking. His lawyer urged him to stay silent, but pride was his weakness. He rose, his voice venomous. "She's lying. She's unstable, paranoid. Look at her. She's the one with the accounts, the one who gave the poisoned glass." The judge's gavel slammed, but his outburst had already sealed his fate. The jury saw it, the desperation, the unraveling. Arthur rose, delivering the final blow. He produced the forensic handwriting report, the champagne label compared with David's medical notes. Identical. Unmistakable. The silence that followed was thunderous. Then the verdict, guilty. The word echoed through the chamber like a hammer breaking chains. David's face twisted, his perfect mask shattering as officers clasped cuffs around his wrists. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He looked at me, searching for the wife he once controlled, the woman who bent under his lies. But she was gone. I held his gaze, cold, unflinching. Checkmate. The cameras flashed as they led him away, his empire of deceit collapsing in full view of the world. For the first time in months, I breathed. Really breathed. Margaret, frail but recovering, reached for my hand from the front row. Her eyes glistened. I squeezed back, a silent vow, we survived. We won. And as the gavel struck for the last time, I knew the war was over. But my story, my life, was only just beginning. The days after the verdict moved slowly, like the world itself had paused to catch its breath. The headlines screamed his name, Dr. David Miller, guilty. His once polished reputation shattered, his face plastered across every news station, not as a healer, but as a criminal. For me, silence returned. But it wasn't the suffocating silence of fear. It was a quieter kind, like the hush after a storm, when the rain has passed but the ground is still wet. Margaret came home 2 weeks later. Frail, yes, but alive. I remember the first morning she sat at the kitchen table again, sunlight spilling across her face. She smiled weakly, reaching for my hand. "You kept your promise," she whispered. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "No, we survived. Together. We rebuilt routines piece by piece. Cooking breakfast. Tending the garden. Listening to the hum of cicadas as dusk settled over Dallas. Life crept back in, hesitant at first, then steady. But the house bore scars. His shadow lingered in photographs I hadn't yet taken down, in the smell of his cologne that still clung to the closet. Some nights I woke in a cold sweat, hearing his voice, feeling his breath at my ear. "Be careful what you dig for." Yet every morning I rose, stronger. The tears came less often. The fear dulled. And in its place, something unexpected bloomed: resilience. I looked at Margaret, her laughter slowly returning, her lemon-scented polish filling the air again as she cleaned the same old furniture. That stubborn citrus smell became a reminder, not of decay, but of endurance. The woman I had been, the naive Rachel who believed in a perfect marriage, she was gone. What remained was someone new. Someone forged in betrayal, tempered by rage, but rebuilt with strength. One evening, as the sun sank over the Texas horizon, I stood on the porch, the cicadas humming their endless song. The sky burned orange and gold, and for the first time in months, I let myself breathe it in fully. The storm had broken me. But it had also remade me. And as Margaret stepped out beside me, her hand warm in mine, I whispered, almost to myself. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." I used to believe survival meant just making it through the night, waking up to another day. But now, I know survival is more than breathing, it's choosing who you become after the storm has passed. Betrayal cut me deeper than I ever imagined. The man I trusted with my life turned out to be the one who tried to take it. That kind of wound doesn't vanish. It scars. And scars, they remind us of both pain and strength. There were nights I thought I would drown in fear. Days when guilt crushed me, knowing Margaret lay in that hospital bed because of a glass I handed her. But in those darkest hours, I found something I didn't know I had: resilience. The power to fight back. The will to rise. I learned that love isn't proven by promises whispered in the dark, but by actions that stand in the light. That family isn't defined by blood, but by the people who hold your hand when the world tries to tear you apart. Most of all, I learned that intuition, the quiet voice inside, should never be ignored. When something feels wrong, it usually is. And trusting that instinct may just save your life. Today, my home is filled with laughter again. Margaret's lemon polish lingers in the air, not as a ghost of pain, but as a stubborn reminder of survival. The house is lighter, freer. And so am I. David is exactly where he belongs. But me? I am exactly where I was always meant to be, free to live, free to love, free to start over. And now I want to ask you. If someone you trusted with everything tried to destroy you, what would you do? Would you forgive? Or would you fight back? Tell me in the comments. And if my story has touched you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, for more stories that remind us that even in the darkest betrayals, dignity and strength can prevail.